Hi, I'm Michael Nolan, Senior Acquisitions Editor for New Writers, and I'm happy to be here at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, March 2008, and I'm interviewing my friend and author Charles Wyke-Smith, who has written just recently the second edition of Stylin with CSS, and that followed up Coding for the Web. And why don't you talk a little bit about those books, Charles? Tell me about the new edition of Stylin and what's different about it from the first one.
Well, when I wrote the first edition of Stylin with CSS, I was trying to write a book that was accessible to people who maybe dabbled in the web a little, had built a few basic websites, but really wanted to get to understand web standards and wanted to understand how to develop in a more considered way. And I'd found a lot of very simplistic books, and I'd found a lot of really advanced books, and I felt, well, there's this whole gap in the middle of like smart people who are probably designers, but realize they need some technical chops and need a bit of deeper understanding around this subject so that they can start to build good interfaces. And that was the original driver for Stylin with CSS, and I jumped in there and gave it my very best shot at the time. But obviously since then I've had thousands of letters from
people it hit a sweet spot. I mean, that book sold and sold and sold.
It much beyond my expectations.
Yeah, much beyond all of our expectations, I think.
As I said yesterday when I was speaking, it's not often you have a chance to revisit a huge project like that and bring out the experience of how the original did and redo it. So in the second edition, I did a couple of things. One was that I really rewrote a lot of the code. My skills simply have improved over the last 4 years, and a lot of feedback of what was useful and what was not, I had as raw material to use. And so I rewrote all of the examples, and I created something I call Stylib, which is a styling library of page templates and components like menus and navigation and all the kind of elements that you basically need to build web pages, forms, tables, and built a library of those. I was tired of writing them for myself anyway, so built the library, and I've published that as part of the book. And so as I walk you through the book, I show you how those examples work, and then once you've mastered the skills of how they work and how to use them, then you can download them from the site and get to work for yourself and expect pretty good results right from the get-go.
So your readers can go to the site and get this library of CSS forms, pull-down menus. I mean, you had one pull-down menu that does not use JavaScript.
That's right. Well, JavaScript menus can be very clumsy, require a lot of code. And I'd seen several of the famous Suckerfish drop-down menus that were the original CSS menus. And so I rewrote those in a very minimalist way, so the code was very light. It was very easy to generate that code on your back end from a database. And really there's just one little CSS class you add to the container for the menu, and the simple lists inside magically turn themselves into drop-down menus. And I had a chance to rewrite those again and make them so you could add one more class, and now it was suddenly not a horizontal menu, but a vertical one. So it's very easy to repurpose those things for your own site.
So this book is really more than a second edition, it's almost new from the ground up.
I virtually rewrote the whole thing. The first couple of chapters I went through and made some edits, and that was my intention through the whole book. And 9 months later I'd pretty much rewritten the whole thing. So I think anybody who bought the first book would find a tremendous amount of new material and a tremendous amount of new code at the Stylin with CSS site, where they could, there's a lot of new stuff in the new book. It was a great opportunity.
It's a fabulous book. Tell us a little about the book Coding for the Web.
Well, once I'd written Stylin, I started to get a lot of letters from people that said, hey, these forms are really nice, but how do I actually make the data that people fill in them go to my database, and how can I pull that back and use that data, say, to mail people and this kind of thing? So it seemed to me like, okay, well, maybe people are ready to go to the next stage now and start to look at the back end. What happens to that data when I hit the submit button? And of course, forms are really the user's way to feed information back to the website. That once you have forms, then that brings an end to the one-way sort of brochure where suddenly now you're starting to get a really interactive site. So with coding, I started to describe how to use PHP and the database MySQL to start to build some of these components. And I took very much the same approach as I did in Stylin, showed some basic, simple examples of how to build a form, how to submit the data in that form and write it into a database, how to bring that data back onto the screen and present it to the user based on what they're searching on. I built a little simple content management system that allows you to enter links and information about the links, store them in the database, and then you can present that page of links to the user so they can link to various sites. But you can apply that concept to any kind of content you wanted. It's very hard and intimidating for people to get into that back-end coding.
It is, yeah.
And
especially the designer
exactly,
mind,
and they
the
think
visual thinker
that's right.
shies away from code.
And I think one of the things that visual designers need to realize is that the web is not just visual design, and I think a lot of people do, but a lot of them are very visually design driven, but really the web is really about experience design.
Yes.
And that involves all aspects of it. It's not just what does it look like, what are the colors, you know, those kind of things, how is the branding. It's about how do I create an experience where users can successfully do what I want to do on the site. And if you want them to buy something or you want them to send you data, then you've got to know those technical things. It's
Sure.
like you want to make a nice table, you've got to know how to hammer in that nail, and you've got to be good at doing it. So coding was a gentle entry into the world
So
of
it's
coding.
a gentle entry into
the world of coding.
code?
Yeah, I would say that's a good way to put it. It's a very much a continuation from Stylin. You could literally put Stylin down the day you finish it and pick up coding and just go right ahead from there. And I assume that you've done that book and you've got the front end piece together before you jump into coding. But it's a natural continuation, and I
Great.
think it allows you to actually create real dynamic interactive sites. And then you can pick up those more complex advanced books and they make sense, and you can really start to grow your skills from there.